Hello, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Oliver.
Hi, I'm Lily.
You are listening to Science in Easy English.
And today our topic is, why do we get déjà vu?
I want you to picture this for a second. You walk into a room, maybe a coffee shop you've never visited in your life.
Okay.
You're chatting with a friend. Maybe the smell of roasted beans hits you, a barista drops a spoon, and suddenly, bam.
You just freeze.
Exactly. You freeze. You have this overwhelming, 100% certainty that this exact moment, down to the tiniest detail, has happened before.
It's spooky.
It is. It feels like a glitch in the Matrix. You know it's impossible, but your brain is absolutely screaming, I remember this.
It really is one of the most common and yet most unsettling psychological phenomena we experience. And because it feels so visceral, so real, people have come up with all sorts of wild explanations for it over the years.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everything from past lives to psychic abilities to parallel universes colliding.
I admit, in the moment, it really does feel a little supernatural, like a premonition. But our mission on this deep dive is to peel back those layers, right? We're going to look at the hard science.
We are.
We've got a great stack of source material here today, spanning psychology, neuroscience, and even some pretty wild virtual reality experiments. And they all suggest this isn't a ghost in the machine.
Right. We'll explore why our brains lie to us, telling us we've seen something when we haven't. And perhaps most surprisingly, we're going to look at why this glitch might actually be a sign that your memory system is working exactly the way it's supposed to.
That is a relief to hear, honestly, because sometimes it feels like my internal hard drive is failing. So let's unpack this. First off, we need to get our terms straight. Is there an actual technical definition for that weird vibe? Or is it just, brain hiccups?
There is a technical definition. The term déjà vu is French, meaning already seen. It was actually coined way back in 1876 by a French philosopher named Émile Boirac.
Wow, 1876. So we've been trying to figure this out for a while.
Oh, absolutely, but the scientific definition is a bit more nuanced than just feeling familiar.
Oh, so?
Well, it's defined in the literature as the clash between a subjective feeling of familiarity and the objective knowledge that the situation is new.
Ah, okay. That clash is the key, isn't it? It's not just thinking you've been there. It's that split second where you go, I know this place. Wait, no, I don't.
Precisely. That realization is crucial. If you didn't have that reality check, it wouldn't be déjà vu. It would be a hallucination or just a false memory. The defining feature is that you know your feeling is wrong while it's happening.
Okay, so looking at the data from our sources, who actually gets this? I feel like I used to get it a lot more when I was younger, maybe in college, but now, well, not so much. Is it a rare thing?
It is definitely not rare. Depending on which study you look at in our sources, somewhere between 60% and 97% of people experience déjà vu at least once in their lives.
Wow. So almost everyone.
Almost everyone. But you touched on something really interesting regarding your own experience. There is a very specific age curve to this phenomenon.
Let me guess. Since it's a memory glitch, it happens more as you get older and your memory starts to slip a bit.
You think so, right?
Yeah.
That is the intuitive assumption. But the data shows the exact opposite. It's really a young person's game.
Really?
Yeah, it's most frequently reported in people between the ages of 15 and 25. And after 25, the frequency drops off steadily as we age.
That seems completely counterintuitive to me. Why would a healthy young brain, presumably at its peak performance, glitch more than an older one?
Well, there are a few theories in the research. One suggests that déjà vu is actually a sign of a healthy, developing brain. It means your brain is doing a really good job of fact-checking.
Fact-checking. Okay, explain that.
Remember, déjà vu requires you to spot the error. You have to realize the feeling of familiarity is false. As we age, our cognitive excitability kind of decreases. We might just accept the familiarity without flagging it as weird, or we simply stop noticing the mismatch altogether.
Oh, I see.
So the fact that a 20-year-old notices it means their reality testing systems are firing on all cylinders.
So if you're getting déjà vu, take it as a compliment. Your brain is sharp enough to catch its own mistakes.
Exactly. And the sources highlight some other fascinating correlations that back this up. For instance, people with higher education levels tend to report it more.
Okay.
It's also more common in people who travel frequently and people who remember their dreams vividly.
Well, travel makes sense. I mean, you're encountering new environments constantly, so there are just more opportunities for your brain to get confused. But there was one other correlation in the sources that stood out to me. Something about politics.
Yes, this is a weird one, but it's in the data. Studies have found it's more common in people with liberal political views compared to conservative ones.
Now, we have to be clear here. We are not taking sides on a science deep dive. But I have to ask, why on earth would political leaning affect a memory glitch?
Right, totally neutral here. The researchers suggest it's not about the politics itself, but rather the underlying personality traits. In psychological terms, liberalism is often correlated with a trait called openness to experience.
Ah,
So people who are generally more open to strange sensations or ambiguity might just be more likely to notice, admit to, and report the sensation of déjà vu rather than dismissing it.
that makes perfect sense. It's about being open to the weirdness of the world.
Us-
Okay, so we know who gets it. But the big question, the one that really bothers me is why? Why does my brain lie to me?
There isn't one single answer, which is what makes this topic so complex. There are a few main theories, and they generally fall into two buckets. You have the psychological theories and the neurological theories. Let's start with the psychological side. This is often called the distracted brain theory.
Is this the idea that maybe I actually did see the thing, but I just wasn't paying attention?
Spot on. This is technically called split perception, and Dr. Alan Brown is a big proponent of this in our source material. I like to call it the cell phone theory.
Okay, walk us through the cell phone theory.
Imagine you're walking down the street, you're scrolling through your phone, looking at a message. You walk past a shop window. Now, you don't consciously see the shot because you're focused on the screen, but your peripheral vision is still working.
Right.
Your brain records the sensory input, the color of the sign, the layout of the display, maybe the smell of the bakery next door.
So the data goes in, but I'm not logging it. It's just background noise.
Exactly. It's recorded subliminally. Then, milliseconds later, you put your phone away and you actually look up at the shop. Your brain lights up and says, hey, I possess this visual info.
But because I didn't consciously log it the first time.
Your brain separates the two events. It feels like a memory from the distant past, but in reality, it's a memory from half a second ago that you just didn't process consciously.
That explains why it feels so intensely like the past. My brain processed it twice, but the first time was basically invisible to me.
Correct. And they've actually tested this in labs. If you flash an image to someone subliminally, like way too fast for them to consciously see, and then show it to them again normally a little later, they report a strong sense of familiarity, but they can't explain why.
That makes a ton of sense for a lot of everyday cases.
Yeah.
But what about when I walk into a place I have definitely never been to? Like, say I fly to a new country, walk into a hotel lobby, and get hit with déjà vu. I couldn't have seen it half a second ago.
That is where the hologram theory comes in. This theory is based on how our memories are actually stored.
Hologram theory, that sounds a bit sci-fi.
It's a great analogy, though. Think about a physical hologram. If you have just a small fragment of a holographic plate, you can still use it to reconstruct the entire 3D image.
Right, the whole image is stored in every piece.
Exactly. Well, our memories work similarly. We don't store neat little video files in our brains. We store fragments and patterns.
So how does that trigger the glitch in the hotel lobby?
Let's say you walk into that new hotel. You've never been there. But the floor has a specific black and white tile pattern that is completely identical to your grandmother's kitchen floor from 20 years ago.
Okay, so one single detail matches.
Your brain spots that one detail, it grabs that fragment of memory and holograms it out. It assumes that if the tile is familiar, the entire scene must be familiar.
It generalizes it.
Deeply. It creates a feeling that the whole context is a memory. You don't consciously remember your grandmother's kitchen in that moment. You just feel the familiarity of the pattern. So your brain concludes, I've been in this exact hotel lobby before.
So it's basically a case of mistaken identity. My brain is matching a pattern but applying it to the wrong context.
Exactly right. It's a pattern matching error. And this leads us perfectly into the next segment of the research, which I think is probably the most compelling scientific evidence we have. It takes that pattern matching idea and applies it to space.
This is the virtual reality stuff, right? I was reading about this in the notes. This is where they actually tried to induce déjà vu in a lab.
Yes. This research comes from cognitive psychologist Anne Cleary. She's a giant in this field. She wondered if déjà vu is triggered not by objects like the tile floor, but by the layout of a space, the geometry.
So not the furniture, but where the walls are, the skeleton of the room.
Right. It's called Gestalt familiarity. To test this, she used a game engine, specifically The Sims, to build virtual reality environments. She had participants walk through a virtual scene, let's say a dungeon.
Okay, done to torches, stone walls, all that.
Then later in the experiment, they walked through a totally different scene, like a hedge maze in a garden.
A dungeon and a hedge maze seem pretty different visually.
Visually, yes.
Hmm.
The decor was totally different, but, and here's the trick, the map was identical. The distance to the first turn, the width of the path, the angle of the corners, it was the exact same spatial geometry.
Oh, wow. And what happened?
The participants reported incredibly high levels of déjà vu in the hedge maze. They couldn't explain why it felt familiar. They didn't say, oh, this is the dungeon map. They just had that eerie feeling.
That is incredible. So it really is recognizing the whole shape of the experience without the details.
And the fascinating thing is, this explains why we can't place the memory. In the hologram example, you might eventually realize it's the tile. But with spatial geometry, it's much harder to consciously pinpoint. You just feel weird.
So déjà vu is basically memory without retrieval. We recognize the pattern, but we can't find the source file in our brain.
Precisely. It's a feeling of familiarity without the specific details to back it up.
Okay, so those are the psychological tricks. The distraction, holograms, spatial mapping. But what about the hardware? Is there something physically happening in the brain's wiring when this goes down?
Absolutely. This brings us to the neurological theories, often referred to as the brain misfire. To understand this, we actually have to look at a specific medical condition, epilepsy.
Epilepsy. That sounds pretty serious.
It is, but it gives neuroscientists a really clear window into how the brain works. Scientists realize that patients with temporal lobe epilepsy often experience intense, prolonged déjà vu right before they have a seizure.
Oh, so that effectively pinpoints the location on the map, the temporal lobe.
Right. The temporal lobe is the part of the brain responsible for memory. And this suggests that for the rest of us, everyday déjà vu is essentially a tiny, harmless electrical spark or misfire in that specific area.
Okay, let's unpack this misfire a bit more. What exactly is going wrong in the circuit?
Well, we have to look at the dual processing theory. Your brain essentially has two separate circuits for handling a memory. One is the rhinal cortex. Let's call it the familiarity circuit. Its entire job is just to say, I know this. It's a gut feeling.
Okay, so circuit 1 is just the red flag that says known.
Circuit 2 involves the hippocampus. This is the recollection circuit. Its job is to provide the actual details, the when, where, and how.
So I know this versus Aki, here's exactly when I saw it.
Exactly. In a normal functioning brain, these fire at the exact same time in perfect sync. You see your friend, the rhinal cortex is familiar, and the hippocampus says, that's Bob from accounting.
But in déjà vu,
There is a sync error. The rhinal cortex fires the familiarity signal, saying, I know this, but the hippocampus lags behind, or it doesn't fire at all, so you get this intense feeling of recognition, but absolutely zero details to explain it.
I really like the analogy I saw in the source notes for this. It's like the check engine light coming on in your car.
Yes.
That light is the familiarity circuit.
Yeah.
It's telling you something is there, pay attention. But when you pop the hood to see what's wrong, the engine is just missing. There's no data.
That is a perfect analogy. You have the alert, but no context. And because your brain absolutely hates ambiguity, it tries to fill in the gaps, which creates that confused, eerie sensation.
There was also something in the notes about a neural delay involving the two sides of the brain.
Yes, that's another major neurological theory. Information from your eyes travels to the visual processing center via two distinct pathways. Usually they arrive simultaneously. But if one path is delayed by just a few milliseconds, maybe due to a tiny glitch in the wiring or a synaptic delay, the brain receives the same information twice.
Kind of like an echo on a bad digital call.
Exactly. The brain timestamps the second arrival as now. But because it already processed the first arrival a millisecond ago, it timestamps that one as old memory.
So you're experiencing the present moment, but your brain is filing it as the past because of a tiny transmission lag.
Which perfectly explains why it feels so real. To your brain, it is a memory. It just happens to be a memory of right now.
That is a fascinating hiccup in the system. It really demystifies the whole past life thing when you realize it might just be one neuron firing slightly slower than its neighbor.
It really grounds it in biology.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting for me. And I think this is why people get so weirded out by déjà vu. It's not just that I've been here before. It's that feeling that I know what is going to happen next.
Ah, yes, the illusion of prediction.
Yes. It's that spooky premonition feeling. Like I walk into a room, I get déjà vu, and I feel like, oh, my friend is about to drop his cup. I feel like I have superpowers for 3 seconds.
This is a very common part of the experience, and it's actually something Anne Cleary, the researcher who did the VR mazes we talked about, decided to test scientifically. She wanted to know, are people actually psychic during déjà vu?
How do you even test that in a lab?
Well, in her VR experiment, she would stop the participants in the middle of the maze precisely when they were reporting a déjà vu moment. She would pause the game and ask them, do you know what the next turn is? Left or right?
Yeah. Could they do it?
They felt like they could. They reported very high confidence. They'd say, oh, I definitely know it's a left turn.
But are they right?
No! They were no better than random guessing. It was a literal coin flip.
So they felt like they knew, but they were completely wrong.
They were wrong. It's what cognitive scientists call a metacognitive bias. The feeling of familiarity is so intense that your brain tricks you. It tricks you into thinking you have hindsight for an event that hasn't even happened yet.
Wow. So it's just a feeling, not a fact.
Exactly. It feels like you predicted the cup dropping because your brain is scrambling to make sense of the overwhelming familiarity, but it's just an illusion.
That is slightly disappointing, I won't lie. I really thought I had a superpower there.
Sorry to burst your bubble. You can't predict the future.
Well, while we are on the topic of weird brain states, we have to talk about the cousins of déjà vu, because apparently there is an opposite version.
Yes, it's called jamais vu.
Which translates to never seen.
Correct. Jamais vu is when something you know intimately, like the face of a best friend or a word you use every day, suddenly feels completely strange, alien, or brand new.
Oh, I've had this with words. You know when you say a word too many times? Like spoon, 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 spoon. Eventually it stops sounding like a word and just sounds like a weird noise.
That is exactly it. That's jamais vu. There was a famous study by Chris Moulin called the Word Alienation Study to prove this. He had participants write the word door, just D-O-O-R, 30 times in 1 minute.
Just writing door, 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 door.
By the end of the minute, 68% of the participants began to feel like door wasn't a real word. They said it looked wrong or sounded like nonsense, or they doubted they were even spelling it correctly.
Why does the brain do that? Is it just getting bored?
It's a reality check mechanism similar to what we discussed earlier. If neurons fire too often, like repeating a word over and over, the brain basically inhibits them to stop the noise. It says, okay, this signal is meaningless now, stop processing it. It strips the semantic meaning away, making the familiar feel strange.
That is wild. It's like the brain has a built-in fatigue setting for reality.
And there was one more cousin mentioned in the research, a much scarier one, déjà vu.
Déjà vu. That means already lived, right?
Yes. This is much more serious than the fleeting feeling of déjà vu. Déjà vu lasts seconds. Déjà vu is a persistent sensation that you have fully lived through the current life events before.
Like being trapped in the movie Groundhog Day.
A bit like that, but without the comedy. It's usually associated with serious memory conditions or dementia. It's not just a fleeting feeling. The person truly believes they are reliving a past life. They might even refuse to watch the news because they claim they've already seen it.
Wow. Which brings us back to regular old déjà vu. By comparison, it seems pretty harmless.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, for the vast majority of us, déjà vu is actually a really good thing.
A good thing. How so? Let's summarize that for the listener.
Think about it. You get the feeling, but you also get the realization that it's wrong. You say, wait, that's weird. That is your brain running a diagnostic test. It recognizes a conflict. It says, this feels known, but I know it's new, and it flags it.
So the fact that I notice it's weird basically proves I'm sane.
Exactly. It proves you are in touch with reality. You aren't losing your mind. You're just catching your brain in a little filing error. It's a sign that your internal fact-checking system is online and working perfectly.
So what does this all mean for us?
It means we can stop worrying about glitches in the matrix and start appreciating how complex and amazing our memory really is. It's a mix of split attention, spatial geometry, and little electrical misfires.
And it's just a sign that our brains are working hard to keep us grounded.
I want to leave you with one final thought, though, something to mull over. We talked about the illusion of prediction, how we think we know what happens next.
Right, the fake psychic powers.
Well, consider this. Why does that illusion feel so real? Some scientists wonder if perhaps our brain is constantly running future simulations to help us survive. We are always unconsciously guessing what is around the corner to keep us safe.
Oh, I see. We are prediction machines.
Exactly. So maybe déjà vu is just the moment we catch our brain in the act, we catch it simulating the future, and for a split second, we mistake that simulation for a memory of the past.
That is a trippy thought to end on. We aren't remembering the past. We're catching a glimpse of our brain trying to predict the future.
It's a possibility.
Well, next time you walk into a coffee shop and freeze, you'll know exactly what's happening.
Thanks for listening to Science in Easy English.
See you next time.